Several years ago, I was in Dallas, Texas for a Shabbos, for a weekend, and a Christian missionary approached me with a quotation from the Midrash. The Midrash is a rabbinic text from many, many centuries ago, where the rabbis write many teachings, and he had a quote from this text in which it speaks about God and a king of flesh and blood. And the missionary was trying to show me how the author of this text believed in an incarnation. He speaks about God, a king of flesh and blood. It sounds like he's talking about God being incarnate as a human being, which is obviously a Christian teaching and not a Jewish teaching. Now, the point this missionary was trying to make is, look, here in this ancient Jewish text, a text which the Jewish people revere and respect, it speaks about an incarnation. So why do you reject the incarnation theology of Christianity? Here in your own texts, it actually says the same thing, what the Christians believe. The way I responded to this missionary was as follows. I simply told him, one second. How much of this text did you read? The rabbi that you were quoting, how much of his writings did you read? Do you know what he believed about who it is that we are to worship? What he wrote about that subject, what he taught about that subject, the conversations he had with his contemporaries about that subject? Are you immersed in the life and in the teachings of this writer? If you would have done so, you would have realized that, without even realizing that your interpretation is a mistake, you would have realized your interpretation has to be a mistake because this writer would never believe in the incarnation. Just to put this in a Christian paradigm, in a Christian context, imagine if you have a pastor of a large evangelical church, a Trinitarian church, and this pastor had been teaching people for years and encouraging people to believe in the Trinity and to believe in the mainstream evangelical teachings. And when he passes on, he left behind him many, many pages of sermons that he had given over the years. And someone comes and he pulls out one sentence from one of his sermons. He says, look, over here you see that this pastor did not believe in the Trinity. So without even getting into details, without even examining this passage, what did he really say? You know that it's impossible. You know this pastor who lived the Trinity and breathed the Trinity didn't teach against the Trinity. So it is with the Jewish writings. These rabbis lived and died for the unity of God, for the oneness of God, for the relationship that the Jewish people share with God as one who is above and beyond all of nature. You don't have to read the text itself to figure out that this rabbi was not preaching about an incarnation, was preaching about a Trinity or some other Christian theology. When I looked at this missionary, the person was quoting to me, and I had a little bit of a conversation with him, I realized that he doesn't know what it says in this text. He combs through these texts like a beachcomber. He's looking for fragments of things that are exciting to him, that are interesting to him. He ignores most of it as meaningless sand, and he found a coin. Oh, this is what I was looking for. That's not how you approach a text like this. A text like this only has to be studied. It has to be something you have to live and breathe. And then you get the feeling of the text, what this person is picking and choosing versus that it seemed to fit his theology. Now, in this particular case, where he was quoting a passage that speaks about God in the same context as the king of flesh and blood, he was not only misunderstanding or misquoting, he was making a mistake that an amateur student of Midrash would not mistake. A common Midrashic technique to speak about the greatness of God is to contrast God's way of doing things with the way of a king of flesh and blood. So instead of conflating and saying God is somehow a king of flesh and blood, this particular Midrash was contrasting and saying a king of flesh and blood would do such and such, but God is exalted and above all and above humanity and above finite existence, and he does things in a different way. So this missionary was not only reading the Midrash out of its general context, quoting the rabbi out of the context of the life of the rabbi that whoever was speaking in that Midrash, but he was making a basic mistake about the very local context of what that line in the Midrash was trying to say.